Hello everyone, welcome to another video. I just want to say, if you hear any background noise, please don't mind that. Just focus on my voice. Anyway, just want to say that real quick. Don't mind it. Anyway, have you ever seen a depiction or myth of Apollo or Dionysus and wondered why they're so... Yeah, me too. Hello everyone, I'm your host with the most, Dia, and today we're talking about Dionysus and Apollo. More specifically, how unique they are in ancient Greece with their depictions. Mythically, the ancient Greek poets could basically write the gods into their stories however they wanted. And if you ever heard a Greek myth, which you definitely have, you know they got creative. But if you were to look at Dionysus's mythology and Apollo's artistic depictions, they're usually different than what you expect. But in what way? Let's get into it before I spoil everything. Quick disclaimer, just like in the last video, we will only be talking about Dionysus and Apollo in myth, and more specifically, mostly in their depictions. Also, we're only going to talk about Apollo and Dionysus in this video, even though really I can make a video like with all of them, all of the ancient Greek gods from all of them, but in this case, like finding stuff like this that's like more specifically unique. But Apollo and Dionysus stick out the most to me, so they're definitely the easiest to start on this topic. Before we start, let's set the scene of ancient Greece, if you don't know already. Note, this is just an extreme simplification of ancient Greece, especially since every city-state was different. There was no such thing as ancient Greece. It was just more like different city-states when historians basically just lumped together as ancient Greece. But more or less, ancient Greece as a whole, as what we call it today, was incredibly conservative and had an extremely bigoted culture. They also had an extreme toxic masculinity culture, as we would call it today, and the quote-unquote rules for being a man was pretty strict. We're not going to get into that today, but they're about what you expect. And these rules for being a man generally translate over into the depictions of the male gods. I like to call this the Zeus and Poseidon special, or the Zeus and Poseidon effect. If you see their statues, they are the ideal man of ancient Greece. And if you see the way they act in myth, yikes. But we're not going to get into that. But for male gods, Zeus and Poseidon was the usual treatment. But for Apollo and Dionysus, they were definitely different. They don't have your typical ideal body type for men in ancient Greece, which I'll explain when I'm talking about the ideal body type. We're about to get into it with Dionysus. So we're going to start with Dionysus, so I'll get into that. Dionysus is such a special case that it's hard to sum it up in a meaningful way. I'll put a good book on him in the description. It's only 100 or so pages, so please feel free to check it out. But he's just so unique, and there's so many studies on him, stuff that you can find online for free. So I highly recommend, just if you want to get more into it than I get into in this video, please go ahead. I mean, obviously you don't need my permission. To start with a picture that helps us imagine why Dionysus is so unique, here's a quote that I love. It's from a book I also like. Why in a society in which women were so restricted should women go out of the polis without male supervision? And it is undeniable that the Phocian women traveled to Amphisia and arrive there at night without male escorts and sing and dance and sing themselves into an ecstatic state to the accompaniment of music because the god demands this as at his due. The god in this case is Dionysus. As much as I love talking about his queer and feminist agenda, we'll have to say that for another day. But I want to mention that quote because it gives us a picture of how Dionysus is so unique and how his worship, I wouldn't say structured, obviously didn't structure ancient Greece. It'd be way better if it did, but not unfortunately. But you see what I'm talking about. Right now, we're here to talk about looks, because obviously that's all that matters. I'm joking. Dionysus is unique in his depictions because, despite being considered a male god, in quotes, because you'll see here, and a lot of literature that he was in, he was largely considered androgynous and had both masculine and feminine traits, while also having simultaneously neither. And also, uniquely enough, while other gods are seen as having human traits only, that I know of, in their depictions, Dionysus also often had beast-like qualities, like having a pair of horns, and in his vases, he was also often depicted among animals, and at times has been depicted as many different animals, lions, snakes, goats, etc. He was depicted as a male god, but he had all the sensuality, softness, and emotional qualities that were associated with women by the ancient Greeks. He was even said to constantly, quote-unquote, cross over to the female realm, whatever that means, which makes sense considering he is the god of crossing boundaries, so of course not even the gender binary could hold him back. From when he was born, this duality becomes clear. Instead of being born from a woman, he was born from a man, classic Zeus's thigh, and in some variation of his birth myth, he was said to have dressed like a young girl to hide from Hera and was raised as a young girl. But not only that, generally in his myths, his birth myth, he was raised on an island of women, so of course he would pick up some of these feminine qualities. Later in life, he continued to wear long robes, as we've seen in some of his statues, while typically men usually wore knee-length robes. Speaking of his sensual and soft appearance, Dionysus was depicted with pale skin, a pudgy body, and curly, long, styled hair, all typical traits of women in ancient Greece. Men were expected to be toned, athletic, and tan because they worked in the field, hence what I mean by the Zeus Poseidon special. But as you can tell, Dionysus is quite the opposite. Of course, you cannot talk about Dionysus without talking about his maenads. Dionysus might be the only god with a follower base of mostly one gender, in this case women. You may think the honor may go to Aphrodite, but she had all kinds of followers of all different kinds of genders. Being a follower of Dionysus gave people, especially women, more freedom. It gave women a chance to express themselves. In Dionysiac rites, people were expected to forget their gender roles, with women taking on more masculine roles such as hunting, and men donning more feminine clothing. Some ancient Greek city-states resisted the worship of Dionysus because it feared the disaster it would bring. But in reality, it definitely has to do with men worrying about women gaining more freedom. And according to ancient Greek standards, a woman not devoting herself to her family completely was a disaster in and of itself. But enough about that. Back to Dionysus himself. When we look at Indo-European languages, they are usually gendered, and for those languages, words are usually gendered in a specific way because of a connection to the roles of men and women have in the society. Like casa and cocina are feminine because the home and kitchen are usually associated with women. In Greek, ancient Greek in this case are different. There was a similar phenomenon. For Dionysus, especially the words associated with him are unusual. Both wine and grapes are neutral words because any gender can eat grapes, but leopard and madness are feminine words. Out of all the words commonly associated with Dionysus, only one is masculine, ivy. The rest are feminine or neutral, or neuter, excuse me. This is unusual because for other gods, the words associated with them usually correspond with the gender they are associated with. And also, Dionysus is considered a god of fertility, which is also strange because fertility gods are usually depicted as women. Everything about Dionysus is extremely layered. He is usually depicted as very feminine, or leading closer to androgynous, but some of his domains were very male-centered, like theater. For reasons like this, Dionysus was given the epithet androgynous. Gender is a completely human concept, and I personally believe that the gods don't have gendered, and as did many ancient Greeks from what I've seen. But even his portrayal in ancient Greek culture, he strives past the boundaries of gender. Everyone give it up for the icon Dionysus. Next, we will talk about Apollo. While Dionysus could be considered androgynous and leaning on both sides of the spectrum, in my opinion, Apollo in his art typically leans very feminine. Also, I do want to say Apollo is such a multifaceted god, and was such a large god in ancient Greece, so I don't want to generalize. He was very different in many different places. Oh my gosh. He's basically, like, the Apollos in ancient Greece are basically separate gods, but for another video. So because of that, he can have so many different ranges and so many different types of representations. But I've noticed in a whole lot of his art, and statues especially, in his art, he is usually very feminine. At least for ancient Greek standards, but also by modern standards, I guess. And to be honest, the more artwork I see of Apollo, the more I tend to notice this. Before it was pointed out to me, I never really noticed, but once you know about it, you're like, okay. Now, I said all I needed to say about the ancient Greek climate in the start of the video, so I'm not going to repeat myself. Why I'm putting Apollo and Dionysus in the same video, they're not really the same in this regard. Otherwise, they carry a lot of similarities and are quite entwined. For example, Apollo has the epithet bestower of Dionysus, and Dionysus was said to replace Apollo when he left for winter in Delphi. But they are not similar in the way that while Dionysus is largely considered more gender neutral in modern words, Apollo was definitely considered a man. Which makes his general femininity even more significant. These children Niobe placed above those of Leto, and spoke rather contemptuously against Apollo and Diana, Artemis, because Diana was girt in a man's attire and Apollo wore long hair and a woman's gown. This is from Hyginus Fabulae 9. Fabulous. And it is very true, because in most of the pictures I see Apollo in, he's either naked or wearing quote-unquote women's clothing. And I don't just mean a long flowy chiton. I mean, he had the works, like he had the outfit. Like in a lot of his art, he's seen wearing a veil, multi-pinned sleeves, cross sash, thigh bands, and of course, the long chiton. If you're looking at it from the screen, you can look at the screen now, because I'm putting depictions if you want to see them. He was also often described as binding his hair, again, which is something that most women did. In a source describing what an effeminate man is, it is said that this person is either impersonating Aphrodite or Apollo. And speaking of Aphrodite, Apollo has often been called the most beautiful god on Olympus, literally stealing Aphrodite's whole hustle. Can't believe that. In a lot of statues and art of Apollo, historians often got him confused with young women. And one of my recent favorite arts from an ancient Greek vase actually depicts Apollo and Artemis, and I kid you not, they are literally wearing the same outfit. Like, actually, hairstyle and everything. Again, I'll put on the screen for your viewing pleasure. It's a picture. I can't find the artwork like a PNG online. It's a picture from a book I have, but trust me, it's real, okay? I hope I have given you a picture into this world of Apollo that I feel like not many people notice. Also, I would like to mention how Apollo's eternal youth is central to his depictions. For example, his long hair. I don't think this really has to do with the fact that he was depicted so femininely. For example, young boys in ancient Greece often didn't cut their hair until they became of age. Then they would cut their hair for Apollo. So long hair, especially in young men, was seen as a sign of youth. Hence why Apollo had the long hair. But you didn't see young boys running around in quote-unquote women's clothing. So while I do believe that the art of the gods is somewhat divinely inspired, so basically Apollo wanted to be depicted that way, but I'm trying to also look outside of this reason, especially since it seems that some ancient Greeks took problem with Apollo being depicted this way. So I wish to look at the deeper reason. Keyword is wish, because I cannot think of or have not seen the reason why he's portrayed this way, despite the reason I said above. Like and unlike Dionysus, but don't quote me on this, a few of the words associated with him are feminine, but others are masculine or neuter. I'm not an expert in ancient Greek, so I generally don't know what I'm talking about. I could not find a neuter word that's generally associated with Apollo, but also I had a very hard time picking out neuter words in general. But, I'm sorry. Okay, so song, music, poetry, and archery seem to be feminine words, while prophecy, healing, plague, and disease seem to be masculine. But again, I'm not an expert in ancient Greek, so I could be very wrong. If you are good at ancient Greek, or you somehow notice a mistake, please feel free to correct me. I want to know. Like I said, I haven't noticed any neuter words, but overall, Apollo seems to be evenly matched in feminine and masculine words. Though I will note, he has a lot of stuff in his domain, but these are just the basics, so not even these words cover it. I honestly think that fits him very well, having an even match. Overall, in Greek myth, Apollo is quite the character, and the way he dressed was included in that. Feel free to check out my sources in the description to also see some beautiful Apollo art and a Tumblr post that I put in the description, which is where I kind of got a lot of my stuff. Not my stuff, my pictures, excuse me. And that's the end of the video. Very short. I thought the Apollo section would be longer, but I guess I don't have much to say. Thanks so much for watching. To be honest, I'm surprised not my Dionysus section is longer than my Apollo section. I expected it to be the other way around. Of course, as we talked about both gods, we're going to say hymns to both of them. The first one is the Homeric hymn to Dionysus. Homeric hymn number 1 to Dionysus. For some say at Draconum, and some on the windy Icarus, and some in Naxos, O heaven born and soon, and others by the deep eddying river Alpheus, that pregnant Semele bare you to Zeus the thunder lover. And others yet, Lord, say you were born in Thebes, but all these lie. The father of men and gods gave birth to you remote from men, and secretly from white-armed Hera. And there is a certain Nysa, a mountain most high and richly grown with woods, far off in Phoenice, near the streams of Egypt. Zeus speaking, and men will lay up for her many offerings in her shrines. And as these things are 3, so shall mortals ever sacrifice perfect hecatombs to you at your feast every 3 years. The son of Cronos spoke and nodded with his dark brows. And the divine locks of the king flowed forward from his immortal head, and he made great Olympus reel. So spake wise Zeus, and ordained it with a nod. Be favorable, O and soon, inspirer of frenzied women. We singers sing of you as we begin and as we end a strain, and none forgetting you may call holy song to mind. And so farewell Dionysus, and soon with your mother Semele, whom men call Dione. And this next one we're going to read is not a full hymn, but Apollo doesn't really have that many hymns. He has his Homeric hymn is really short, one of them. And I like his Orphic hymn, but I've been reading it so often lately because I'm not trying to be doing that. But I really love his hymn from Callimachus. But of course, that one, if you know that one, is really, really long. I can't read the full thing. But I really like the beginning of it, so just listen, okay? I'm sorry I can't read the full thing, but, you know. So this is the Callimachus hymn to Apollo. How the laurel branch of Apollo trembles. How trembles all the shrine. Away, away, he that is sinful. Now surely Phoebus knocketh at the door with his beautiful foot. Seest thou not? The Delian palm nods pleasantly of a sudden, and the swan in the air sings sweetly. Of yourselves now ye bolts be pushed back of yourselves, ye bars. The god is no longer far away, and ye young men prepare ye for song and not for dance. Not unto everyone doth Apollo appear, but unto him that is good. Whoso hath seen an Apollo, he is great. Whoso hath not seen him, he is of low estate. We shall see thee, O archer, and we shall never be lowly. Let no youths keep silent lyre or noiseless stepped when Apollo visits his shrine, if they think to accomplish marriage and cut the locks of age, and if the wall to stand upon its own foundations, well done the youths, for that shall, it is no longer idle. I don't really like this translation of the Callimachus hymn. I don't like the old timey translations, you know what I mean, like the doth and all that. Like, I feel it's kind of necessary, but I'm sorry. So sorry if my reading's a little wonky. Again, thank you for watching. May you be blessed by the gods, and don't forget to praise them. They are on your side, and goodbye.